Can you just kind of take me back to that first STEM tour in the 2011, 2012, what you were mentioning about, just to kind of get that reception? Because I think that's a really cool concept that kids who may not necessarily, like you said earlier, turned off the STEM in the classroom, but when they get to skating, they really enjoy it and they're clicking with those concepts. What was that reception like? What was that tour like?
Okay. Well, that tour was long, and it was an experience. As I said before, my friend Dr. Bill, he was the one who really kind of created that whole concept of building STEM around skateboarding, and he would do tours like in the Southwest and whatnot, but nothing to like this extent. So it was one of those things that it came about with in regards to, there was a friend at the time who worked for an edutainment company and saw me skating and was just like, hey, there's a lot of physics in it, because he's really into science and whatnot. And I was like, yeah, no. And he's like, well, can you explain it to me? And I said, sure. And I explained it to him. And he goes, oh, wow. He's like, you really have a good handle of it. And I was like, well, yeah. And he said, well, what's your background in? He said, did you just skate? And I was like, well, yeah. But I said, I'm an engineer. And he's like, oh, that's why. So like we started talking, and he basically told me, he's like, look, he goes, if you can come up with an idea, like a curriculum, all right, and you can break down X, Y, and Z concepts that we'd like to cover, because that's what the schools are looking for. We'll put it out there to the schools and see if it sells. It's like, sure. So put something together. It was like for a 40-minute show. And we put it out. We were working for one of the biggest edutainment groups in the country. So we presented it to them, and it was something that they thought they could sell, and they put us on. So basically it was only supposed to be like 20 some odd weeks, and it was only supposed to be like 100 shows or something like that at first. It ended up being 34 weeks and 350 shows in 40 states, and we're traveling about 50,000 miles, all by car.
Nice.
And we had a brand new, they gave us a brand new Prius V. It was when the Prius V first came out, so it was like the bigger one. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But because we had all this equipment, we had to take the back seats out of a brand new car, and we had to retrofit it so that it would fit all of our stuff in. So the ramps that we used were all modular ramps that we could fold up, or we could put in, and we'd take the legs out, whatnot, and slide in. And basically we were riding down the road with all of our DJ equipment, all of our skateboard stuff in the back, with our backpacks or whatnot for our clothes, and then we'd have the grind bar basically go from the back all the way up to the front to where the shifter was.
Nice.
So basically you'd put your arm, the armrest was the grind bar, so we would just shift from there. So that was crazy. So yeah, I did 40 states in 34 weeks, and the reception to that was great. It was unbelievable, really. I think we did the math in regards to it, and we outreached to over 250,000 students, and all types of students. We did public, private, and special needs schools. So it was really cool. And then we even did, when we got into the Southwest, we even did reservations and stuff too. So I was on a lot of the native reservations and stuff. First Nations people and whatnot, and I'm part First Nations as well. So it was a real good experience to kind of see some of that and see some of my roots and whatnot within regards to that aspect of my life, but also like just to be able to outreach to people who, for them, they never even saw a lot of like assemblies, because they were like out in the middle of nowhere, like literally in the desert.
Yeah.
Like we went to this one, it was in Second Mesa, and it was Second Mesa's in Arizona. So we started in Flagstaff, which is all trees, right, and like evergreens and whatnot. And then you go down into Phoenix, which is kind of like Florida. It's flat. It's got palm trees. It's got sand. Whatever. It's just basic.
Yeah.
Within regards to like visual wise, it's like Florida. And then you go to Second Mesa, and you're just driving, and you're driving, and you're driving, and you just see these big like things in the distance. You're like, oh wow, that's cool, little rock formation. You don't realize that rock formation is 30, 40 miles away from you. And then you get there and you see it's like this big monolith right there, and you just keep going. So by the time we got there, one of the first places we went to for the First Nations was the Hopi Res. And we get on the Hopi Res, and there was nothing for like 2.5 miles of driving, nothing around there. And thank goodness we had a hybrid, because we were running on fumes. And we get to the Hopi Res, and we're like, yeah, we're looking for a gas station. I'm like, oh, there's a gas station here. Well, it all depends on how good the show is. It will tell you what it is. So we're like, all right, no pressure, right? So we go in and we do it, and you know, with Native kids, culturally, it's a different type of show. They're very respectful. They are very reserved usually. So when we do something, you get a response, but it was kind of like we weren't sure if they were into it or not. And then they got really into it, and then we had some talks and whatnot. But I'll tell you what, that was one of our best shows because the kids were super hyped, and a lot of times at the end of the shows, we'd give high fives to everybody, and every single one of those kids gave us high tens. You know what I mean? So we're doing high tens all the way out. And it just like, but we stuff like that all the time we'd run into, whether it was on a res or if it was at a regular school. Each audience was different, and they brought their own energy, and it got you stoked to go to the next one, you know? And so, I mean, that was a really eye-opening experience. What also was eye-opening about it is it really showed me visually the discrepancies in education as well. I mean, there were some schools, we were the first, and now think of this, we were there in some of the schools, this was like in some of like the Title I schools, you know,
Mm-hmm.
that are in rougher areas. We were their first science component ever. Like there's schools that don't even teach science, you know what I mean? So like some of the schools we went to like down south or like, you know, like in Virginia or even further down and whatnot, we were their first taste of what science was. Mm-hmm. They were focused on reading and math, and that was it, which is kind of counterproductive because if you have to have science to be that go-between. Yeah. You know, because if you get them interested and stoked on something, they're going to read more about it, which helps with their comprehension and with their reading ability. And if they are interested in science and whatnot, math is the language of science, so it goes hand in hand. Yeah. You know what I mean? And the fact that we were their first science component, it really, those light bulbs that we were talking about earlier, that's exactly what we saw a lot. It was, and I traveled with this guy, Tristan, who was a biology major, you know, and he actually learned how to skateboard out there when we were out on the tour. He never skateboarded before. He was 25 when he went out, and he was 25 grad student, and then he came back as a skateboarder, which was rad. So we had a lot of adventures and stuff. There was a couple of close calls, like when you're driving through Oregon and whatnot, and they're like, your next stop is over here. And you're like, oh, wait, that's only an hour and a half, right? That's only if the mountain that you have to drive up around is passable. Yeah. And if it's not, you have to drive 3.5 hours this way up and then cross. You know what I mean? So they say we tried the mountain. And we're in a Prius and everything's going good. We can fit it through like under trees, do all that stuff. And then we get to the top of the mountain, and it's 75 degrees at the bottom, and there's snow at the top of it. Nice. To the point that we couldn't pass. We couldn't go any further. I mean, it's a Prius, you know what I mean? Yeah. So we had to back this thing up and drive up, and there's no guardrails, mind you, right? Nice. And my colleague was driving at the time, so he would back up, and you see the ground starting to crumble underneath, and he was getting freaked out. So I drove down the rest of the way. And that, so I mean, there was times that we would run into that, and there'd be times that we ran into other skaters. Like my friend Mike Rogers was doing a big event down in Atlanta. He does like this cancer benefit for people who have cancer. He was a sarcoma cancer survivor, and he's like a legendary skateboarder, and survived it. You know, he's removed his eye, removed a bunch of stuff, had facial reconstruction, had a brain lift, the whole nine. Oh. And and to this day, he is cancer free. But he was doing a big like art show, you know, there. And we happened to run into him. We just happened to be passing in, and they were coming in, and I was skating at a park, and I just hear, "You, buddy," and I look, and there he is, and it was kind of like one of those like free flowing type of things. So it was cool. We met a lot of cool people out on the tour. When people found out what we were doing out on the road, they thought it was really rad. And the teachers. That was really what was really cool is the teachers. A lot of the educational staff would come up and like, yo, we want to do more hands-on stuff. Like just the fact that you showed them this, and then we get them involved in it too. So we had like different things that they could participate in, being safe, of course. Yeah. But to show about like centripetal forces and like why you have to spread your feet out on a skateboard to keep your balance. So we'd have somebody like stand on one foot, and they have to keep their center, which is we'd say their belly button, for instance, over their foot, and then we just tap them and they'd fall over.
Yeah.
Like, why is that? So it's only because you have that much surface area. Now we got to spread it out, and then we showed. Then like they stand like a skateboarder, and we went like this with them, and they got to see like how they could move without falling over, and everybody thought it was a great show because they could visually see it and they could understand what that felt like, right? So like, all right, that's cool. Then we talked about like safety with the helmets, like why is it important to ride a helmet, especially when you're first starting, and about distribution of force over time and space. So we'd have everybody take their finger and push it into the head. And does that feel good? They're like, no, not really. Now take your hand and put it here and push as hard as you can. Does that feel better? I was like, push harder. And they do it, and they're like, yeah. I said, does it hurt as bad? They're like, no. It's because it's distributing force over time and space. So we'd also do demonstrations where like I'd fall and I'd show them 3 different ways of falling and spreading out the force, and that's how skateboarders stay safe. Because there's like this misconception that skateboarding is dangerous. And yes, anything can be dangerous if you're not sure what you're doing. But when you break it down by the physics and stuff like that, you realize a lot of these things that people think are dangerous, it just comes down to physics. And if you understand the physics involved and you're respectful, you can do anything, really. And I mean, we even had this one, there's a blind girl who was at one of the shows. And of course, she could not see it. She was hearing it, and she heard all of her stuff, and she came up and she's like, oh, that sounded like a really good show. So we did something with her that we didn't do with anybody else. So her teachers were there, and I had a board with no wheels, and I got her on the board and being able to do tic-tacs and to be able to spin and be able to walk on the board and do different things and do pop-ups just so she got that feel of it. And, the teachers saw that, and they were like, wow, we didn't think that this would have been accessible to her. And I was like, of course it is. You just have to look at it from a different lens.
Yep.
And as a skateboarder, we look at everything through a different lens. So even the way we teach, it's hitting all the stuff that they're teaching in a traditional setting. It's just in a different way or different application. So the response to it overall was very, very positive, to the point that it was one of the best-selling shows for that particular group for like 8 years. We were able to hire like a bunch of people to do that one. For me, I did it 1 year. I was the first one to go out there and stuff, and the skating wasn't the hard part. It was the traveling, being in that car, because we would drive to a place, and then we'd set up, and I'd do like, say, 2-3 shows, right? And then we'd have to pack everything up and go to another spot and do another show or 2, right? And then pack that up and then drive another 2, 4, 6, 8 hours to the next one. You know what I mean? And then we would just crisscross. And it was a lot. That I went out 210 pounds. I came back 175.
Wow.
So it gives you some perspective of like how much. And then I'd only have 1 day off, because after I would do all the schools, we would go to skate parks. And that's how we went from doing 200 shows to 350 shows, because they would see us, and then I'd explain stuff to the kids and just skate with them and show them some tricks. And then the parents are like, what do you guys do? Started that conversation, gave them our pamphlet of information. Mom started talking, and next thing you know, we were booked for that. And there was a couple places like in New Mexico. We were there for a whole week. Wow. We stayed in the same town for a whole week. We did all their schools. Wow. We did every single one of their schools, to the point people were coming up on the street. Hey, what's up, Mr. AJ? Hey, Mr. Tristan, what's going on? You know what I mean? So it was like, we became like, I don't know, for a small minute, like, mini celebrity. You know what I mean? In regards to like, oh yeah, that's the guy who jumped over, who did a kickflip over my principal or something like that. You know what I mean? And stuff like that. So it was really rewarding. And then we'd run into skateboarders all the time. Like we'd be eating and we'd see kids skating out in the parking lot in like Missouri, for instance, in the middle of winter, and it was like 20 some odd degrees outside. I'm like, what the heck? And I'm like, dude, I totally remember that when I was a kid. So we'd go out there and talk to them, and their mom was with them and whatnot. So we were like, hey, come on in, and I think it was at Taco Bell. We went to Taco Bell or something. We saw, and we just started talking about skating. And they told us where all the good spots were, and we're like writing them down, like cool, and we still in contact with some of them. You know what I mean? They still like hit us up from time to time, which is really cool. So yeah, that's basically that. And then once we did that tour, it proved that it was viable and that we could do it. And we broke that into, we didn't just do skateboard science, but we also did, which is physics and mathematics and stuff through skateboarding, but we also did health and wellness, which is called Skate for Life. And talk about mind, body, and spirit and stuff. And we do that from K to 12, in all the schools,